I thought I had a pretty great life. My name's Mike, I'm 35, and I've been married to Jenny for almost 10 years. We have one kid, a bright little girl named Sophie, who fills our lives with laughter and a fair amount of chaos. Jenny and I had met in college, where we bonded over late-night study sessions and similar tastes in music. We were the couple who seemed to be meant for each other, you know. We had inside jokes, shared dreams, and even the occasional date night. But in the last year or so, things started to change. At first, it was subtle. Jenny, who used to be the life of the party, began spending more time away from home. She picked up yoga classes, which I initially thought was great. I even encouraged her to take some time for herself. But soon I noticed shifts in her behavior. She'd come home late, often too tired to talk, and when I asked about her classes, her responses felt vague, almost rehearsed. "Just a friend from yoga," she'd say. Whenever I asked about a guy named Mark who seemed to be popping up more and more in her conversations, I wanted to trust her, but a nagging feeling crept into my mind. My gut told me something wasn't right. I'd catch her scrolling through her phone, her face lighting up in a way that felt secretive, text messages that she'd quickly swipe away when I entered the room. It felt like walking on eggshells, and I hated it. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just stress from work or my own insecurities creeping in, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Then came the night that shattered everything. I had taken Sophie to my mother for a sleepover, thinking it would give Jenny and me some much-needed time together. I returned home, excited to surprise her with her favorite takeout. As I entered our living room, I noticed her phone buzzing on the coffee table. Curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up, and the notifications were from a social media app. The last message was from Mark. "Had a great time last night. Can't wait to see you again." My heart dropped. A wave of confusion and anger coursed through me. I knew I had to dig deeper. I opened the app, and there it was, photos of Jenny and Mark together, smiling, laughing, their body language too intimate for my liking. They were at a restaurant, at the beach, and even at some yoga retreat. It was clear they were more than just friends. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the images. Each one felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. I felt hollow, betrayed. How could she do this to me, to us? I spent the rest of the night in a haze of emotions. Anger bubbled up, mixed with disbelief. I wanted to scream, to confront her right then and there, but I didn't. I decided to gather my thoughts first. I needed a plan. The next day, I confronted Jenny. She came home from yoga, looking radiant, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to hit her. I could see the surprise on her face when I asked her to sit down. The moment I revealed the truth about the photos, her demeanor shifted. She went from relaxed to defensive in seconds, and I could feel the tension thickening in the air. Her reaction was nothing short of infuriating. She denied everything at first, claiming they were just friends and that I was being paranoid. I pushed, showing her the evidence. The anger in me was boiling over, but I also felt a deep sadness creeping in. I needed answers, not just accusations. Jenny's excuses were as flimsy as they were painful. She tried to downplay her relationship with Mark, insisting it was nothing beyond friendship. But I could see the guilt etched on her face, the way she avoided eye contact. It was clear she was lying, and I hated that I had to fight for the truth in my own home. The confrontation left me reeling, feeling lost and betrayed. It was a whirlwind of emotions, and I was spiraling. I needed to figure out how to move forward, but I was terrified of what that would mean for my family. How could I heal from this? Would I even be able to look at her the same way again? I felt like I was in a fog, unsure of how to navigate the aftermath of this bombshell. But one thing was clear. I couldn't let this go unanswered. I had to decide how to respond, how to reclaim my sense of self and peace. Would I fight for my marriage, or was it time to walk away? The thoughts consumed me as I began to think about a plan for revenge. I knew I couldn't just let her get away with this. I was at a crossroads, and there was no turning back. After that explosive confrontation with Jenny, I felt like I was walking through a minefield. My mind was racing with thoughts and feelings I couldn't quite process. I had always considered myself a reasonable guy, someone who prided himself on being level-headed. But this was different. The betrayal cut deep, and I was angry not just at her, but at myself for being so blind to everything that was happening. In the days that followed, I found myself in a dark place. I would sit on the couch late at night, staring at the walls, replaying every moment of our relationship in my mind, wondering where it all went wrong. The laughter we shared, the intimate moments, and those little signs I had ignored. I felt like a fool for trusting her, for believing her lies. It was a crushing realization that shook the very foundation of my life. I decided I couldn't just wallow in my sorrow. I needed to take action, to regain some control over this situation. My plan for revenge was born not out of a desire to hurt her, but rather from a need to reclaim my dignity and self-worth. I knew I had to show her that I wasn't just the husband who could be taken for granted. I figured the best way to do this was to level the playing field. I began by reaching out to old friends, people I hadn't connected with in years. It felt good to reconnect with people who saw me for who I was before I became just Jenny's husband. I started going out more, rediscovering hobbies I had long neglected. I took up running, signed up for a cooking class, and even spent a weekend camping with some buddies. It wasn't just about keeping busy, though. I wanted to show Jenny that I was moving on, that I was capable of happiness without her. I started posting pictures of my adventures on social media, me hiking, cooking delicious meals, and enjoying life. I could see her getting more and more uneasy as I shared snippets of my new life. I hoped it would make her realize what she stood to lose. During this time, I also decided to investigate further. I wanted to know just how deep her betrayal ran. I began discreetly following her when she went out, keeping my distance but making sure I was aware of her movements. I wasn't proud of it, but the need for clarity pushed me to do things I never thought I would. One evening, I trailed her to a small cafe where she met Mark. My heart raced as I watched them from a distance, sipping coffee and laughing together like nothing was wrong. I felt the anger boil inside me again, and for a moment I wanted to confront them right then and there. But I held back. I wanted to gather more evidence to show her that I knew exactly what she was doing. The next week, I managed to get my hands on her phone while she was in the shower. It felt wrong, invasive even, but I needed to know the extent of this affair. I went through her messages and photos, and it was worse than I imagined. She had been texting Mark constantly, sending him flirty messages that made my stomach churn. They discussed meeting up, shared personal details, and even exchanged intimate photos. It felt like I was reading a different version of our love story, one where I didn't exist. Confronting her again felt inevitable. I didn't want to go into this blindly, though. I wanted to have everything laid out clearly so she couldn't twist the truth or deny her actions. I compiled the evidence, screenshots of her messages and photos, and I mentally prepared myself for round two. That evening I sat her down again. The atmosphere was tense, the air thick with unspoken words. I could see the moment realization dawned on her as I laid out the evidence. The color drained from her face, and for a split second I felt a surge of satisfaction. But then came the dread of the emotional fallout. "Mike, please, let's talk about this," she began, but I cut her off. "Talk? You mean lie some more?" I shot back, anger seeping through my words. "You've been lying to me for months, Jenny. This isn't just a mistake, it's a full-blown." Her excuses came pouring out as if rehearsed, slippery and desperate. "It was just a phase, we weren't really together, I didn't mean to hurt you." But I wasn't having it. I told her how I felt betrayed, how I'd trusted her with my life, and how she shattered that trust. Her tears didn't sway me. It was clear she was more concerned about herself than about the pain she had caused. As I stood there, I realized I was ready to finalize my decision. I wouldn't just let this slide. I needed to reclaim my life, and that meant making some hard choices. I was done being the victim in my own story. I had to decide whether I was going to fight for what we had or cut my losses and walk away for good. For the first time in a long while, I felt empowered. It was time to take control of my narrative, to become the hero of my own story. I had a plan in mind, one that would ensure I wouldn't just disappear into the shadows of her betrayal. The wheels were in motion, and I was ready to follow through. After that intense confrontation, things shifted in our household. The air was thick with tension, and the silence hung heavy between Jenny and me. Although I was feeling more empowered, she was clearly reeling from the fallout of her actions. I don't know if she felt genuine remorse or just panic about being caught. Either way, I had to keep my focus on what I needed for myself now. In the days that followed, I made it a point to keep things civil but distant. I started spending more time out of the house, whether it was running errands, hitting the gym, or taking Sophie to the park. At first, I felt guilty for leaving Jenny alone in the house, but I quickly realized that I needed space. I had been so focused on preserving our family that I had neglected my own well-being. Jenny would often try to engage me in conversation, but I kept my replies short and unemotional. When she asked about my day, I'd respond with a simple fine before changing the subject. I could see the frustration and hurt in her eyes, but at this point, I couldn't muster the energy to care. I was done being the one to provide comfort while she was the cause of my pain. I also started talking to some close friends about what was going on. They were shocked by the news, but their support made me feel less alone. They reminded me that I deserved better than betrayal and that I had the strength to move forward, whether that involved repairing the marriage or finding the courage to leave it behind. They helped me see that my happiness should come first, and it felt good to have allies in my corner. The real turning point came one weekend when Sophie was visiting my mother. I decided to use that time to lay out my plan. I started gathering all the evidence I had collected, the texts, photos, and everything else that exposed Jenny's affair. I was determined not to let her manipulate the narrative. I needed to take control of the story and prepare for what was coming next. That evening, I called Jenny into the living room. She walked in, looking somewhat tentative. The way she avoided eye contact told me she knew it wasn't going to be a casual conversation. I had papers spread out on the coffee table, and as she sat down, I could see her pulse quickening. "Jenny," I started, my voice steady but firm. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about us, about what I want moving forward. This isn't just about you and Mark anymore. It's about me too." She opened her mouth to protest, but I held up a hand to stop her. "I know what you're going to say, and I don't want to hear it. You've had your chance to explain, and you've chosen to lie. What I want is to put everything on the table." I began laying out the evidence, showing her screenshots of their messages, photographs from their outings. Each piece was a reminder of how deeply she had betrayed me, and I could see the color draining from her face with every new revelation. "Do you really think you can just say you're sorry and make this all go away? You've broken our family, and I can't just pretend it didn't happen," I said, my voice rising slightly. "You had a choice, Jenny. You could have come to me, talked to me about whatever was missing in our relationship, but you chose deception instead." As I spoke, I saw flashes of guilt and anger on her face. She attempted to shift the blame, saying things were complicated and that I had been distant too. But I wasn't in the mood to be bullied by her guilt trips. I reminded her that our issues didn't justify her actions. "You think this was just a phase, don't you?" I continued. "That it doesn't mean anything, but it does. It means that you've made a choice to be with someone else instead of working on what we had. That choice is unforgivable." I could see her starting to crumble, the facade of confidence she had maintained slipping away. "I never meant for it to get this far, Mike. I just wanted to feel wanted," she finally confessed, her voice barely a whisper. My heart ached, but I couldn't afford to feel sympathy for her. "You chose to cheat, Jenny. You could have come to me, told me what you needed. Instead, you threw away our marriage for a fling with a guy from yoga. I can't just sweep this under the rug." With tears streaming down her face, she reached out to touch my arm, but I recoiled, not wanting any physical contact. I needed her to understand the gravity of what she had done. "Jenny, I need to think about my next steps, for the sake of our daughter and for myself. This isn't just about fixing things, it's about deciding if I can ever trust you again." She looked defeated, and for the first time I felt like I was gaining the upper hand. I was standing firm, even as the emotions swirled around us. But I knew this wasn't the end of the conversation. It was just the beginning of a new chapter in my life. As I left the room, I felt a strange mix of emotions, anger, sadness, but also clarity. I was finally ready to reclaim my narrative. The betrayal had hurt me deeply, but I wasn't going to let it define me. I was going to make choices that honored my worth, and that meant deciding whether I could forgive her or if it was time to move on for good. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but at that moment I felt empowered. I was ready to take the next step, whatever that would look like. The days that followed were a blur of emotions and decisions that weighed heavily on my heart and mind. After that confrontation, things at home felt more strained than ever. Jenny kept trying to engage me in conversations, but each time I saw her, I was reminded of the betrayal. The tension was palpable, and I could tell she was scrambling to regain my trust, but I was still processing everything. I found myself leaning heavily on the support of my friends. They would come over, bringing food and a much-needed distraction, filling the air with laughter and support. I expressed my feelings freely to them, and they reaffirmed my right to feel hurt, angry, and confused. They encouraged me to think not just about Jenny's actions, but about what I truly wanted for myself moving forward. That weekend, I took the time to go through the paperwork for a divorce. The thought of it was jarring, but I knew it was essential to consider my options seriously. I spoke with a lawyer who explained the process, and as he laid out the details, it felt surreal. I was genuinely preparing to end my marriage. As I sat with him, the weight of my decision pressed down on me. I couldn't shake the memories of our wedding day, the promises we made to one another. But sitting in that office, I realized those vows meant nothing if they had been broken so easily. I was done being the one who fought to keep things together when Jenny was busy tearing them apart. I returned home with a heavy heart but a clearer mindset. I needed to have another conversation with Jenny, not just about the betrayal but about our future. This wouldn't just be about rage or revenge. It was about healing for both of us, even if that healing meant separation. That evening I called her into the living room again. This time I wanted to set the tone for a more serious discussion. "Jenny, we need to talk about our future," I said, keeping my voice steady. I wanted to approach this with a sense of clarity, not just anger. Her face fell and I could see the worry etched into her features. "Is this about Mark again?" she asked, defensive. "No," I replied, shaking my head. "This isn't about him. This is about us, about what's next. I've spent a lot of time thinking and I need you to listen to me without interrupting. Can you do that?" She nodded slowly, her eyes brimming with uncertainty. I took a breath, gathering my thoughts. "I can't pretend that what happened doesn't matter. You made a choice to cheat on me. I'm not sure if that's something we can come back from." Jenny opened her mouth, but I continued, cutting her off again. "I know you're going to say you're sorry, that you want to change, but I'm not looking for apologies anymore. I'm looking for a way to move forward, whether that's together or apart, but we can't keep living in this limbo." Her gaze dropped to the floor. "I know, I messed up and I hate that I hurt you, but please, Mike, I want to fix this." "Fixing it isn't just about saying sorry, Jenny. It's about trust, and right now I don't trust you. I can't ignore the fact that you had a whole other life while I was here, trusting you. It's like you were living a double life." The silence hung heavy between us as she processed my words. I watched her face as she tried to form a response, and I could see the conflict within her. "What do you want then?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. "Do you want a divorce?" That question hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't wanted to address that directly yet, but I knew it was time to be honest. "I think I need to consider it. I need to think about what's best for Sophie and me. I'm not saying it's what I want, but it's on the table. I need to protect myself." Jenny let out a shaky breath, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I never wanted to hurt you, Mike. I don't want you to leave. Please, let's go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes to show you I can be better." Her plea tugged at my heart, but I'd heard variations of these promises before. Counseling could help, Jenny, but that can't be the only solution. I need to see genuine change from you. It's not enough for you to just say the words. "Then what do I do?" she asked, desperation creeping into her tone. "First, you need to cut all ties with Mark. No more contact, no more friendship. You need to show me that you're serious about this," I replied, my voice firm. "And I need time to think. I can't promise I won't consider a divorce, but I'm open to seeing if we can fix this, if you're willing to put in the work." She nodded silently, wiping her tears away. "I can do that. I will do that." After that heavy conversation, I felt a mix of relief and uncertainty. I had laid my cards on the table, and now it was up to her to decide how she would respond. It felt like a crucial turning point for both of us, a chance at healing, or the beginning of the end. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I was afraid of what the future would hold, but I also knew I had taken the first steps toward reclaiming my life. Whatever happened next, I was determined to stand my ground and prioritize my own well-being. I had to trust my instincts, even if it meant making difficult choices. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized that the coming days would be critical. I would need to keep my eyes open and my heart guarded. It was time to see if Jenny was truly committed to change, or if this was all just another act in a play where I no longer wanted to be a part. The following weeks were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions and intense moments. Jenny seemed genuinely committed to making things work after our last discussion. She cut all ties with Mark, deleted his number, and even unfollowed him on social media. At first, I was cautiously hopeful. It was a step in the right direction, but I couldn't shake the feeling of mistrust that lingered like a shadow in my mind. We decided to go to couples counseling, and I approached it with an open mind. I hoped it would help us communicate better and address the deep cracks in our relationship. The first session was awkward. We sat in the therapist's office, both visibly tense, and I felt the weight of my anger bubbling just beneath the surface. The therapist, a calm and collected woman, Dr. Lewis, guided the conversation gently. She asked us to share our feelings, and I found myself opening up about the hurt and betrayal. I loved her and I thought she loved me back, I said, my voice thick with emotion, but I can't ignore the fact that she chose to share her affection with someone else. Jenny chimed in, her voice trembling as she spoke. I was lost and I made a terrible mistake. I never wanted to hurt Mike. I know I can't take it back, but I want to be better. There was sincerity in her eyes, but part of me was still hesitant. Trust didn't just reappear on command. It needed time to heal. As we continued going to therapy sessions, I tried to remain open. We talked through our feelings, our past, and the changes we both needed to make. I noticed Jenny making an effort to reconnect with me, planning small dates and trying to reignite the spark we once had. She would bring me coffee in the morning and leave little notes around the house, reminding me of the love we had shared. Moments like these made me feel seen again, but they were often overshadowed by the memories of her betrayal. Despite her efforts, I was still grappling with the anger and sadness that would bubble up unexpectedly. One night, after a particularly challenging therapy session where we uncovered more issues, I confronted her again. Jenny, I feel like I'm still carrying the weight of this betrayal, and I don't know how to let it go, I said, frustration seeping into my tone. I want to believe you can change, but every time you do something nice for me, I can't help but feel it's just a way to make up for what you did. It's hard for me to trust that it's genuine. Tears welled in her eyes, and I could see her struggling to find the right words. I know I can't erase the past, but I promise you I'm working on myself. I want to be the partner you deserve. I want to be a better person. Can't we move forward? Moving forward takes time, I replied, my voice softer now. And it's not easy for me. I feel like I'm on a roller coaster of emotions and I don't know how to get off. That evening we sat in silence for a long time. I was lost in thought, unsure if I could truly forgive her. I didn't want to keep reliving the past, but I couldn't overlook the fact that she had broken the trust that had taken years to build. I had built a wall around my heart, and though I wanted to let her back in, I was scared. Over the next few weeks, we continued our counseling sessions, and I noticed some progress. Jenny was more open about her feelings and started to share the reasons behind her actions. She spoke about feeling neglected, about how the pressures of life had taken a toll on her, and how she lost herself in the midst of it all. It was hard to listen to, but I had to admit it shed light on some of the issues we had faced together. One day, during a session, Dr. Lewis asked us to consider what we truly wanted from our relationship. It was a pivotal moment for both of us. I realized I didn't just want to survive, I wanted to thrive. I wanted a partnership built on mutual respect, trust, and love, not one shadowed by betrayal. After that session, I finally found the courage to voice my thoughts. Jenny, I want to rebuild our relationship, but we need to establish boundaries. I need time and space to heal. If we're going to make this work, we both have to commit fully. No more secrets, no more lies. I need to know that I'm your priority." She nodded vigorously, tears in her eyes. "I promise. I want to make this right. We can do this together." But even as I said those words, I felt a lingering doubt. Could we really rebuild what had been broken? Or was I simply holding on to the vestiges of a love that had morphed into something unrecognizable? As I left the therapist's office that day, I felt a glimmer of hope mixed with trepidation. It was a long journey ahead, and I couldn't predict where it would lead us. But one thing was clear. Whatever happened next, I was no longer willing to be a passive participant in my own story. I was ready to take control, to fight for what I wanted, and to make choices that honored my worth. With each passing day, I grew more resolute. I was prepared to face whatever came our way, whether it meant rebuilding our relationship or seeking a new path entirely. The decision was mine to make, and in that I found a sense of peace. As the weeks went by, I found myself caught in a delicate balance between hope and skepticism. Jenny continued to show her commitment to our marriage, attending counseling with me and making efforts to understand my needs. I was still vigilant, though. I wanted to believe in her transformation, but found it hard to forget the pain of her betrayal. We had set up regular check-ins as part of our healing process. During these conversations, we'd share our feelings, discuss any lingering doubts, and outline our expectations moving forward. It felt like we were slowly rebuilding a bridge that had been burned, piece by piece. I appreciated her vulnerability during these discussions. She was willing to take responsibility for her actions. One evening, after a long day at work, I returned home to find Jenny cooking dinner. The aroma of spices and herbs filled the air, and there was a warmth in the atmosphere that felt almost nostalgic. I could see her working diligently in the kitchen, and for a moment a wave of comfort washed over me. It reminded me of the early days of our relationship, when we would cook together and share laughter over our culinary experiments. As we sat down to eat, I couldn't help but smile at her effort. The food was delicious, and I appreciated the gesture. But even in that moment of warmth, I was reminded of the fragility of our situation. I was still grappling with the reality of her infidelity. "Jenny," I said as we finished our meal, "I really appreciate everything you've been doing lately. It feels nice to reconnect, even if it's slow." "Thank you, Mike," she replied, her eyes shining with sincerity. "I want to show you that I can be the partner you deserve. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove that." In that moment, I realized how far we had come. I understood that rebuilding trust takes time, and while the wounds might not heal completely, we could still carve out a new path together. I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. Perhaps we could create a new version of our love story, one built on honesty and open communication. But just as I was starting to feel optimistic, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, while I was sorting through some old files at home, I stumbled upon a letter Jenny had written but never sent. My heart raced as I opened it. The letter was a heartfelt reflection of her feelings at the time of the affair. In it, she expressed her struggles with feeling disconnected from me, her frustrations, and her overwhelming desire for validation. There were words of regret, but also admissions of guilt that made me realize just how lost she had been. Reading it was like peeling back another layer of our relationship, and while it hurt, it also offered insight into her mindset. I contemplated whether I should confront her about the letter. In the end, I chose to bring it up during our next counseling session. I wanted to provide a platform for both of us to share our perspectives honestly. "Jenny, I found something," I said, my voice steady but uncertain. "I found a letter you wrote, and it really opened my eyes to how you felt before everything happened." Her face turned pale as she listened, and I could tell the weight of that letter was heavy on her. I didn't mean for you to see that," she said, her voice shaky. "I know," I replied gently, "but it's important for us to address those feelings. I want to understand your perspective, even if it's painful." During the session, we talked through the letter's contents, and Jenny opened up about her feelings of inadequacy and the loneliness she had experienced in our marriage. It was hard to listen, but it helped me see that while her actions were inexcusable, they were also a cry for help. By the end of the session, I felt a strange sense of relief. We had taken another step toward healing, confronting the root issues instead of just the symptoms. It was hard work, and I knew our journey was far from over, but we were making progress. In the months that followed, we continued to attend counseling and work on our relationship. I learned to let go of the anger that had been eating away at me. There were days when I still felt the sting of betrayal, but those moments became less frequent. I found strength in focusing on the present, on the small joys that life offered us every day. Eventually, we reached a point where I could say I was starting to trust Jenny again. It wasn't perfect, but we were in a better place than we had been just a few months earlier. I found myself laughing more, allowing myself to enjoy our time together without the shadows of the past looming over us. One evening, as we sat together watching a movie, I turned to her and said, "You know, I'm proud of how far we've come. I think we're really building something new here." Tears glistened in her eyes as she smiled. "Me too, Mike. I know it's not easy, but I'm so grateful we're still together." That was the moment I realized I had found peace, not just with her but within myself. I had faced the pain, confronted the betrayal, and emerged stronger. I'd learned that sometimes love means working through the darkest moments together, and that healing is a journey, not a destination. I still didn't know what the future held, but I was ready to embrace whatever came next. Together, we were forging a new path, one step at a time, and finally, I felt hopeful about what that journey might bring.